Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. This is the Waiver Wire Show, and we'll start out by going over some news and notes. Just a quick reminder for waiver wires. Just because these guys are on these lists does not mean that you have to go and get them. You may have somebody who would be on this list next week if enough teams drop them. You know, these lists are often, for the most part, made up based on ownership. For instance, for the most part, my list is going to be guys who are less than 50% ESPN owned. I do go to another source just to backtrack a little bit and look at some of the other sites in case there is a big name that's really a lot less owned on other sites and add them into the list. There are no major waiver wire options this week, truly, so don't need to waste too much time on this. A little thought on some strategy this week. It may not be a bad idea if you're not desperate for anybody that's available to just hold off on the waiver wires and see if any teams drop somebody who's valuable, who you like more, because there are a few bye weeks with a fair amount of fantasy players combined between the grouping there who, you know, may cause teams to have to drop somebody they don't want to have to drop. The fewer bench spots that you have in your league, the more important I think that advice may be to follow, or the more important it is to keep in mind here while setting up your waivers. So let's just start out with some news and notes. First thing was earlier in the week, Robbie Anderson was traded to Arizona, and just on top of that, Marquise Brown's injury looks like it's going to be about a 6 probably plus week injury, 6 or more week injury before his return. And so that is better than the initial report that it was going to be season long. So we'll see on that. Still just 2 reports that have come out, really. And who knows? Maybe something came out this morning already, more definitive. But it is what it is. As far as Robbie Anderson going to Arizona goes, he's not somebody that he's not even, doesn't make it on waiver wires. So I think he's still owned in enough leagues. So if you have him and you like this, go ahead and keep it. I really think overall this probably helps most of the weapons that are left there in Arizona. I would think this might help Rondale Moore just to be a little bit more efficient and not have so much attention on him. And then the rushing attack, this should help to open that up a little bit. Should help, hopefully, Kyler Murray and that offense just be better, score some more points. So that would be helpful for everybody. And same with getting DeAndre Hopkins back. That should be helpful in that venture for Arizona's offense. And he is the only one who I think this could potentially hurt to some extent, just maybe from a pure target overload consistency kind of point. That may not quite be the case now with Robbie Anderson coming in, and that was only going to be the case with Marquise Brown going out there. That is that for that. And then the Saints are not expecting Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry back this week, so keep that in mind. Especially there are some, I like the wide receivers probably the most this week for waivers. So there are a few options there that you could think about grabbing. For the most part, they're probably longer term options, but hey, it is what it is. And the team is optimistic that Chris Olave will be out there. I believe this is a Thursday game, so in that sense, you will be able to totally plan for that this week, but also keep that in mind if you have a busy schedule on Thursdays. Going back to DeAndre Hopkins, he may not be available due to the short week, the coaching staff said. So we'll see. He may not be out there this week, or he may be in a limited fashion this week. Limited. So just keep that in mind, especially when setting your starters, that if you're not desperate to start DeAndre, hold off another week might be a good idea. Elijah Mitchell is expected to be back after San Francisco's bye week. I believe their bye week is in 3, so maybe in 4 weeks or so, about a month early. I think that was early to mid-November, maybe mid-November is when Elijah Mitchell is expected to be back. So Jeff Wilson owners, prepare for that. Then Darrell Williams is likely out this week, and Connor is day-to-day. Some more Arizona news. Connor may be in or out. So yeah, obviously that's a Thursday game too, again, for Arizona, so more time to plan for that. Andy Dalton suffered a back injury for New Orleans, so that was all the news on that. I don't know how severe it was or wasn't based on the news report. Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston are both on notice right now, but they said that they don't want to play Jameis Winston until he's at 100%. He's not at 100%. I would think it could be a little bit of time before he gets to 100%, but I don't know. As far as Jameson Williams goes, he is not ready to return to practice yet. They have just had their bye week this past week, so the hope was that he would be prepared to come back to practice at this point. It is not the case. It could be longer. I think I warned you about that last week, that things weren't looking so great for Jameson Williams in fantasy this year. Still, if you have an IR spot available, not the worst person to hold on to if you can. Carson Wentz had a 4 to 6 week injury, so Taylor Heineke comes in. Not really too excited about that. Expect Mitch Trubisky to be starting in week 7, and that's due to the Kenny Pickett injury concussion. So, we've seen players, for the most part this year, aren't able to come back in the same week as their concussions. Tua is back. I don't think that's 100% for sure yet, but that is the expectation, and the expectation of the team even. So it's a pretty sure thing, like I said, after last week, that was a really good sign that he put in a full practice last Friday. Then Melvin Gordon got benched last night? Exclamation point, sure. Question mark. I don't know what was going on there, so you never know. He could be the starter again next week. Could not be. Probably, I don't know. It's a weird one. Moving on to the bye teams for week 7. Bills, Eagles, Vikings, Rams. So if you have those players, be aware, prepare. And looking ahead, Kansas City and the Los Angeles Chargers have a bye week in the coming week. So, quarterback, tight end for the most part here in Kansas City, running back, wide receiver here in the Los Angeles Chargers. Think ahead if you can, and this week's waiver wire is, I think, some of the best advice. If there are no major targets for you, let's get on to the quarterbacks. Right here is just sort of my drop list. If in that order, these are the most droppable guys. Once we get to Goff, Derek Carr, I'm really not looking to move them, especially for the options that we're having right now. But here is my waiver wire options for the quarterback. I have Jimmy G up top, Matt Ryan a very, very close second. Those two are really the only two that I'm comfortable replacing down to like Rodgers with, for sure. As far as Jimmy G goes, I like this lineup right here. Kansas City, Los Angeles Rams in the new games with their defense being depleted after the bye week. Things could change on that. He could go back down to just being a waiver, a streaming option. Then as far as Matt Ryan goes, going up against Tennessee and Washington in the next 2 weeks. So that's nice set of matchups there. Just still a little bit concerned how much we can trust Matt Ryan, but I think it's worth any kind of risk if you're on the fence there, especially for these coming 2 weeks, if it's a short-term thing. Marcus Mariota, 14% owned. That's what these percentages are. He is a schedule-wise, season-long. It's not too shabby. I think it was just more good games than bad games for him. It's not super great as far as I recall, but definitely not bad, which is right about where Mariota does good. Then I have Jacoby Brissett here, 6% owned, going up against Baltimore, Cincinnati, then a bye week. He's really just, especially for this week, is the only reason he's up a little bit ahead of. If you need a short-term option, if you need a replacement this week, and all these other guys are gone, it's a depleted waiver wire for quarterbacks. That's Jacoby. Don't mind him this week. Don't mind him this week. And then Daniel Jones, I believe he had a tougher matchup coming up, and that's why I dropped him down a spot or two here, but I do like him season long, 13% owned, and that offense I think is going to continue to prove week in and week out. As far as Zach Wilson, Justin Fields go, I know some people may tell you to take them for one reason or another, but just understand that they have very rough schedules this season. Just they're not games that you're going to feel comfortable putting these guys out there in until they've had at least 2 good games in a row. And I don't know that they're going to have 2 good games in a row with this schedule. So, with their schedules, I should say. Going ahead and for the running back waiver wires, double check your waiver wire list. Make sure that Brian Robinson is not available. He should be owned in all leagues. I don't know how great or not he'll be, but he is pretty much the de facto starter there in Washington. Slight bit of concern. They did prefer the second half split of carries where Antonio Gibson was more involved there. After the game, their coaching staff said, hey, we like that split more than what we did in the first half, where it was all Brian Robinson. Last week could have been a little bit of fool's gold as far as usage goes for Brian Robinson. There's still just a large opportunity there. And speaking of large opportunities, Kyron Williams also has a very good opportunity ahead of him. I do think that he will be the number one-ish running back there. They do a split, but I don't think that they trust Darrell Williams as a between the tackles, every down-ish back. So I do think that Kyron Williams is definitely worth an add. Rachaad White is a top backup. Still like him more than a couple of these two options this week that are coming up. So Latavius Murray, with the benching of Melvin Gordon and with Mike Boone not being the number 2 back there as we thought may be the case, that left Latavius Murray as the top lead back. He did pretty good against a pretty really bad running defense so far this season. So he didn't take advantage of that to its full potential, which probably doesn't say a lot about the offensive line there. So I'm not super excited to get Latavius Murray, but there's opportunity once again for him. You could do worse if you are desperate. Then same with Kenyon Drake. If you are desperate, he may or may not be the de facto starter next week, or have earned himself more roles. I don't think that we can say with confidence that it just wasn't a precautionary thing there with J.K. Dobbins and his knee tightening up. Kenyon Drake's far from a smash. Don't be spending a whole lot of fab on him. And also, he plays Cleveland, Tampa Bay, New Orleans. Don't absolutely love that upcoming schedule for him either. Then Zamir White, I think, is still a really good bench back to have in case of injury to Jacobs there in Las Vegas. Wanted to say the wrong city for that. As far as Tyler Algier, Caleb Huntley, Damian Williams goes, just kind of left this like I had it last week. But I think that Caleb Huntley may have worked himself up ahead of Tyler Algier at this point. So he is my top back to own, I suppose, at this point in that backfield. However, I think that backfield's incredibly risky to own. Damian Williams could come back at any point, and then Cordero Patterson as well will be coming back soon enough. So not great long-term value either for these guys, but he's my favorite out of the bunch right now. And then here's my list, just going on down. You can read that all you want. So Josh Kelly did have a knee, ended up being questionable for the rest of the game last night, didn't come back. I don't think that it's a big issue. If it were to be a big issue, I'd slide Sony Michel somewhere. I probably don't add Sony Michel into the list. I just don't see the juice with him. He looked pretty good last night, but still just not enough juice. He ran hard, and that was what they needed. But, yeah, those are the order. Deion Jackson should probably be lower. Didn't he get injured this week? I believe he had a quad injury, so. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, in my opinion, is droppable at this point. Sure, he may go off at some point, but I don't see that being consistent. And, there's other options. There's better options that you can get out there with more upside, pretty much like these guys right here. So that begins with Rondale Moore as my number 1 waiver wire pickup this week. Just like that, we've saw it with Greg Dortch, lots of targets. No, the makeup of this team is going to be a little bit different, but I still think that a lot of that's there. And as I said, the addition of Robbie Anderson may be helpful for Rondale Moore. Michael Gallup, somebody just to check and see if he is available yet. They do play against Detroit this next week, and the season-long schedule is nothing great, nothing terrible, and then Dak should be coming back, I believe, this week. So definitely somebody just to make sure. He didn't quite make my cutoff there at 51% owned, but wanted to point him out again. Then Wan'Dale Robinson, I have next up on my list this week. I've spoken a fair about him. Really like him as a prospect. Really like how much the team likes him. Obviously like his efficiency in his first game back on 13 snaps, 4 targets, a touchdown. I can't remember if he had any rushes. I think he might have. And then obviously the receptions. If there's anybody with the most upside right now, it's probably Wan'Dale, but Alec Pierce isn't too far behind him, and Alec Pierce is another rookie doing good. We've heard about him, but he's still not very highly owned, so you should, as it appears that Indianapolis offense may be heating up, there's some good opportunity there for him. I don't think he's a smash play, but I think a very good bye week guy to have. Same with Devin Duvernay. I don't know about the trustworthiness of week in and week out, but there's such a high upside being in that offense there. It's slacking a little bit right now, but they'll be back. Then Isaiah McKenzie is a bye week fill-in type guy, and Tyquan Thornton's another guy with a lot of upside. So Isaiah McKenzie just makes it up here because of the offense that he's on. Weird thing about that offense, it seems like in matchups that are close is when their running backs and like their slot game, their short receiving game does better. And then easy matchups where you would think that they would just run the ball. They don't just run the ball, and they actually pass pretty deep down the field, and the Isaiah McKenzies of that team don't feast. So that is something to keep in mind as far as playing the matchups there. It's a little bit in reverse of what you would, or inverse of what you would expect usually for teams. Then Tyquan Thornton, rookie, spoke about him in the Saturday recap video. Definitely love the fact that team's trying to get the ball into his hands, and he has all the big play potential of literally any prospect ever. So, a lot of upside there-ish. You know, it's still the New England offense, and there's a fair amount of those deep ball guys, which is the only reason why I don't have him higher. Might just be a game plan guy, so he'll have some weeks that he's great, and some weeks that he's not. A little concerned on that. And then here are the rest of my waiver wire wide receivers in that order, so you can pause and look at those. Van Jefferson is coming back after the bye week, so that should be next, right? They have their bye this week, so in week 8, Van Jefferson will be back. Something to keep in mind. Think about, do you think that that's going to help that offense quite a bit? Obviously, if it helps that offense, that means that Van Jefferson's involved. He did pretty good for fantasy last week. It was last year. Surprise. And Jameson Williams, we spoke about that. Julio Jones spoke about that last week. We're playing the long game with him, so not necessarily expecting him to be coming back until he's at like 110%, if that's possible for Julio. Then on to the tight end options. Robert Tonyan skyrocketed up the list. This isn't solely because of his performance for me. This has a good little bit, at least, to do with Randall Cobb getting injured and being out. That makes Robert Tonyan the number 2 trusted option in the receiving game now for Aaron Rodgers at a time where he is looking to simplify things and find where his trust can, where he can trust to throw the ball. And going up against Washington, so decent matchup this week as far as the defense goes. Then Buffalo after that, so a high-scoring opportunity there. And then Detroit after that, so a really good matchup. So that was the other reason for slipping him all the way to the top of the list. Those 3 factors. Big week, good opportunities coming up, and an injury on the team that I think may give us the Robert Tonyan that a lot of people wanted this season. Then moving on to Evan Ingram. Here is the schedule going forward. Make of that what you wish. So not the best, not the worst. Some good opportunities. I would say after these next coming 2 weeks is really where it looks pretty there. I still think Evan Ingram's one of the higher upside guys as far as a consistent target, 5 targets a game goes. A good floor guy is what I like Evan Ingram for. Then I didn't really quite know how to end up ordering these guys, so I'm just going to talk about them. Cade Otton, Cam Brate's injury it's just a sprained neck, so I don't know what the time frame on that is, but if it's anything more than like 2 weeks, and I like Cade Otton kind of up here, I do believe that he has as good of an opportunity as anyone, and he and Tom Brady really seem to have a connection with one another, so it looks more smooth than Cam Brate. So even if Brate's coming back in like 3 weeks, Cade Otton could work his way into the good graces of Tom Brady. Then Greg Dulcich started last night for the first time for the Broncos. That was a tight end opportunity in the preseason that I really liked with Albert O. Was really high on him, luckily backed off of that a little bit, but and was not advocating to be drafting him as highly as I had him ranked. But whatever the case, there was a reason for that, and part of that has to do with the system that was brought there in Denver. They like Greg a lot. We saw some of that in like the first quarter last night for Denver. Of course, that's where the question comes in, is this Denver offense can be pretty yucky, has been pretty yucky all year. little bit of risk of hoping that that offense can pick things up and start to look better there if you wanted to go with a Greg Dulcich kind of guy. Then Hayden Hurst, didn't know how far down to drop him or not. The thing is I like guys on good offenses in the tight ends position, especially like the Kansas City's, Buffalo's, and Cincinnati's. I'm trying to think of some other, those high scoring offenses. I like the tight ends in because there's more touchdown opportunities for them, and that's, you get a touchdown at tight end and you're at least in the hunt there as far as doing just fine against most other tight ends. Then Foster Moreau going up against Houston this week. That is the third best matchup at tight end as of week 5. And obviously, this only matters if Darren Waller is out. Haven't seen any injury updates on Darren Waller. He got injured, I think it was towards the end of last. I don't recall when it was, but in their last game before their bye week, he did have a hamstring, maybe? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. And that is quite potentially a 2 to 3 week injury, depending on the severity of it. Could be more, could be less. Somebody to keep in mind the moment you hear any bad news on Darren Waller. Then Daniel Bellinger, started talking about him a couple weeks ago, I believe, and had another good week this week. And yeah, I think he's a good, solid tight end option to have. Same with Hunter Henry. My only question, the only thing that helped keep Hunter Henry down a little bit on this list this week was Bailey Zappi has been the quarterback. While he's done his best, Jonnu Smith was out for at least one of those weeks. While he's been doing well, Jonnu Smith came back. He still did really well, but Bailey Zappi was the quarterback, not Mac Jones, so we'll see. And then here's my rest of the waiver wire list in that order. Is I think the importance of having him. Dropped Logan Thomas down here a fair bit due to Carson Wentz going down, and Mike Gesicki. If Waddle were to be injured and not playing, Mike Gesicki goes up on the week to week list. So anytime that Waddle's down, I do think that Mike Gesicki gets a bump. So that is it. Y'all take care. I'll see you in the rankings videos on Wednesday. Bye-bye.